What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do part 2 of our kettlebell sport programming series. In part 1 we talked about short intervals and why we need them in our training and physiological effects, etc. And today we're going to talk about long intervals. And long intervals in my methodology are 2 to 4, maybe 5 minutes. And as always, we're trying to get around 8 to 12 minutes of total work, because that's going to be equivalent to our competition distance. So we usually train for 10 minutes. So that's around the time under tension we want in our training as well. And we are looking at a work rest ratio again of 1:1. So if we work for 2 minutes, we're going to rest for 2 minutes, but we can modify that up or down, and we're going to get slightly different adaptations. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. So durations, 2, 3 or 4 minutes is what we're usually talking about. Maybe we could even include 5 minutes in that category, and we end up with 4 to 6 sets of 2 minutes, 3 to 4 sets of 3 minutes, and 2 to 3 sets of 4 minutes. And maybe we could also do 2 sets of 5 minutes. And here I'm just showing you guys an example. This is what I did yesterday. I did 2 sets of 4 minutes of work of double 28 kilogram long cycle, and I rested 5 minutes between those sets. So what is the actual effect of that kind of training? Well, with the short intervals, we're like up to 1 minute, we're really training our power and our lactic capacity, but we're getting not really the VO2 max adaptations we're looking for, because to really get into VO2 max training, we need to elevate the heart rate considerably and keep it there. And to actually, yes, if you do 1 minute on, 1 minute off and do like 10 sets, towards the end, your heart rate is going to go up, because you just don't get back to baseline in the 1 minute rest intervals after the first couple ones, right? But to really elevate the heart rate towards a level where we get true VO2 max improvements, we need to work for more than 1 minute. We need to work for at least 2 minutes, and ideally 3 to 4 minutes. And that's what we see, for example, in running. That's classic VO2 max training. Is, for example, the very popular Norwegian 4x4, where we do 4 sets of 4 minutes of work and 3 to 4 minutes of rest. Now 4 sets is a lot of volume for kettlebell sport, because we have the muscular fatigue and we have the higher impact because of the external load. So we usually do 2 to 3 sets of 4 minutes, like I explained in the beginning when I talked about the volume guidelines. And this type of training is going to lead to both central and peripheral adaptations. So central adaptations just means adaptations of the heart. So the heart is going to get stretched by filling the left ventricle of the heart with blood, and thus increasing stroke volume. It's going to learn to contract harder, even though that is not as trainable. And those are central adaptations. And just as important are the peripheral adaptations. This is basically just the oxygen uptake at the working muscles. So for example, the mitochondria in the muscles, it's called mitochondrial respiration. They're going to become more efficient, and that's an adaptation we train with this type of work. So this is really the most effective way to increase VO2 max, are those long intervals. And since our kettlebell sport distance of 10 minutes is exactly equivalent to the intensity we can work at VO2 max, this is a sport that's highly dependent on that quality. And that's why those long intervals really, even though they suck, even though they hurt, should be the meat and potatoes of your training of your kettlebell sport training. So to recap, we have 4 to 6 sets of 2 minutes, we have 3 to 4 sets of 3 minutes, and we have 2 to 3 sets of 4 minutes. Now, how can we adapt the rest period? So in general, work-rest ratio of 1:1 is a good guideline. So you can do like 4 minutes of work, rest for 4 minutes, and then you do another 4 minutes of work. But like here in the example I'm showing you guys, I rested for 5 minutes. So if you increase the rest periods slightly, it can increase the quality of each individual interval because the recovery is going to be more complete. And that's especially a good idea if you're just getting started with a new weight, for example. Like, for example, 28s are like still relatively heavy for me, right? And on the other hand, if you want to kind of get a more incomplete recovery, you can reduce the rest in between sets. Not too much, but for example, doing 4 minutes on, 3 minutes off would be definitely a good idea. If you reduce the rest by a lot, for example, you could do something like 2 minutes on, 1 minute off, right? The recovery is going to be very incomplete, and you're going to get more of a stable high heart rate, right? So obviously the quality of each individual interval is going to be lower. You're just not going to be able to work as hard in each interval, but it's going to be an effect that's more similar to a long set, right? For example, a long set of 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes compared to real intervals where we still have like a very high heart rate and a very high output during the interval, followed by rest where we actually can recuperate, so we can keep the quality of each individual interval high. And that's like just what's going to happen physiologically during the rest periods, depending on how you modify them. Obviously, that's also something you can use in your programming to progressively overload. For example, you can start with 3 minutes of work and 5 minutes of rest even, and then you gradually reduce the rest periods until you're doing 3 minutes of work and 3 minutes of rest. And that's really all there is to say about the long intervals. It's hard work, but it pays off. If you want to see that completely integrated in a working methodology that's going to get you to a personal record, check out my long cycle domination program. The link is in the description. It's going to be very useful for a lot of you, I'm sure of that. Or you can also reach out for online coaching with the email address in the description. Alright guys, that's all I got for today. I hope it was useful, and see you next time.